Okay, folks, well, it's so nice to have you here with me today. My name is Julie Evans. I'm the CEO of Project Tomorrow, and I am very pleased to have this opportunity to share with you some information about how to participate in Speak Up this year. So I do want to start off by thanking both Donna Murray and Deborah Goodman from the Department of Public Instruction, who have been involved with us for several years in supporting Speak Up and invited us to do this webinar with you today. So many thanks to Donna and to Deborah. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Speak Up is. It's part of my Speak Up 101 class. What you need to know to get started to have your schools and district participate in Speak Up. And then, of course, who do you turn to? Where do you get your questions answered? Now, to do that, during the presentation part today, I'm going to give you some examples from last year's data, both from the national data set as well as data that was collected from North Carolina students, parents, teachers, and administrators. At the end, we'll talk about all the different ways that Project Tomorrow can help you be successful with Speak Up, both during the data collection process and also after the data collection process when you get back your data. But we have left plenty of time for your questions. And as Amber noted, whether you are just on the audio part or you're on the Zoom part, we'll facilitate a way to get your questions answered. So a little bit about Project Tomorrow to get started. Project Tomorrow is a nonprofit education organization. We're 100% focused on supporting K-12 education and have been since 1996. Our overall mission is to make sure that today's students are well prepared for the future. We happen to believe that the power of STEAM to support student preparation is an important component of that preparation. So we have both programs and research focus on the role of digital tools within schools and districts. Now, we are best well known for our Speak Up research project on digital learning. So let me tell you a little bit about that in case you're not familiar. But I do first want to recognize all of the different partners that we have that support us in our Speak Up work. And I'm sure there's plenty of organizations here that you are familiar with. Okay, so a little bit about Speak Up. It is an annual research project that we've been conducting since 2003. Just a little bit of a backstory or an origin story here. In 2002 and 2003, we were realizing that while there was a lot of interesting conversations and discussions happening around the role of technology within learning, in many cases, those discussions did not include the ideas of students. In some cases, they didn't include what the expectations were of parents, or even the views of teachers and other administrators within the schools and districts. So we created Speak Up to facilitate a way for schools and districts to hear from their key stakeholders, those frontline stakeholders, students, teachers, parents, and administrators, as well as teachers, about what was happening with technology in the classroom and what they needed to do to better empower those stakeholders to use technology effectively. So the Speak Up Research Project uses online surveys, and then we also do some focus group work all around the country. But most importantly, it is 100% facilitated through schools and districts. So we don't have a random student take the Speak Up survey or a random teacher or a parent from this community but not from that community. In fact, we make the surveys available to any K-12 schools or districts that want to use them to collect feedback from their own stakeholders. Now, this is 100% a free service that we provide to schools and districts. We do all the heavy lifting. We design the online surveys, make sure that the topics are appropriate, that they are being asked appropriately for those audiences, and then we promote those surveys to schools and districts to use. As I said, we do all the heavy lifting, we do all the back-end work for you. So we do have surveys available for K-12 students, teachers, parents, administrators at all different levels in administration, both school site as well as district level, and also for community members. And we'll talk a little bit more about those as we get into some of the data. Now, the way the process is set up is that we actually have all of the schools and districts in the United States already in our database. The back end of our database is the U.S. Department of Education's NCES database. So all of your school information, the address, the school ID, all of that information is already in our database. What we ask schools and districts to do is register with us to participate. What that means is designating a contact person that we can send information to about Speak Up, about the deadlines, about some of the promotions we have coming up, about new resources that are available for you. But most importantly, that contact is the key person for receiving back your locally collected data. Now remember, one of the key things with Speak Up is that we give back to you all of your locally collected data, as well as state level data, North Carolina state level data, and national data, so that you have an opportunity to do some benchmarking. So that district contact is important because that's our key person, not only for information during the data collection process, but also to get that data back in early February. We provide you with an online link, a URL, that provides access to the surveys. We do have the system set up so that it requires a password for the students. That password is something that you set up. Lots of schools and districts will use a mascot or a local landmark as their password. You then promote that link to your stakeholders, and as I said, we manage all the back end for you. We manage all the data collection. We can provide you with weekly counts in terms of your participation, and then once again, you get back that locally collected data. Now, if you are at a district level, you will get district level aggregated data, but you will also get school by school data as well. Now, we do take the national data and we share that every year to inform policies and programs that are impacting schools and districts around digital learning. We create a number of white papers and infographics. We also do a congressional briefing every year. And I do probably about 60 presentations at conferences and at webinars, including things such as this, to share out the national data. Since we started this in 2003, we've had about 5 million surveys that have been submitted to us, making Speak Up the largest collection of authentic feedback from K-12 stakeholders about their experiences with digital learning. Now, the types of questions on the Speak Up survey are primarily about the use of technology to support learning. However, we do have different questions. We ask different questions of different audiences. So we ask teachers about their needs for professional development. We ask parents about their concerns about technology use at school. We ask students about their interest in the STEM careers. This year, we're also asking students about their interest in teaching and careers in the arts. We ask all the stakeholders, though, to talk to us about their interactions with a wide range of different types of emerging trends or technologies. Now, the key thing here is that we have these different questions and we go through the process of determining the questions. However, in many cases, these are questions that we ask every year. And so we have an opportunity to show some longitudinal data. I'm going to share some of that data with you as well. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out to you is that for this year, we have a couple very special themes in addition to these general topics. We actually did a very deep dive this year into digital citizenship. We have some new questions around cloud computing, which is very interesting from a district administration standpoint. We also asked students, educators, and parents about their attitudes about math education and math proficiency. And then we are continuing a trend where we ask the different respondents about their use of data to inform instruction. That has been a really interesting data set. Now, one of the things that makes the Speak Up surveys a little bit different than some other survey processes that are out there is that we don't just ask the respondents to talk to us about what they are doing with technology, in other words, their activities. We also ask them about their attitudes and aspirations. So how do they value the digital learning experiences? How do they value the different uses of technology? But then also, how would they like to use technology to help them for learning? So we ask questions across all three of these vectors: activities, attitudes, and aspirations. And we happen to believe that it is the interaction between those three types of questions that gives you the very best data that you need to be able to have some sort of actions or results coming from the data collection. So it's not just about what people are doing or not just about what they think about it, but really the triangulation of those three vectors, looking at it across the audiences and also the differences over time. So we know that too often, particularly in planning around digital learning, some folks will rely upon a myth or some conventional wisdom or what they believe or an anecdote. So we heard this from one teacher, we heard this from a couple students, so we believe it to be true. Our real goal here is to help you make better decisions around your digital learning plans. And so by facilitating this process for you, we are hoping that we are empowering or enabling better decision making by helping to build up your capacity. And again, this is 100% a free service that we provide. There are no costs that are associated with participating in Speak Up at all. So let's talk a little bit about last year, just to kind of give you a perspective here, and then I'm going to share with you some of the Speak Up data from last year to give you a feel for the types of things that you might be able to collect from your stakeholders and also how that data might impact your plans going forward. So last year in Speak Up 2016, we had the surveys open from the middle of October to the middle of January. That's kind of our traditional time frame. This year's surveys are open right now, in fact. But last year we collected a little bit over 514,000 surveys from schools and districts all across the country in all 50 states. So you can see the breakdown here in terms of the number of surveys for the different audiences, about 435,000 surveys from students, about 38,000 from teachers and librarians, almost 30,000 parents participated in Speak Up last year, 4,500 administrators, and 5,800 community members. They were representing about 2,400 districts and a little bit over 7,000 schools all across the country. Now, one of the things that we do with the data is that we always want to make sure that we are representing a highly statistically significant sampling of the country in terms of the data participation. And so that's why it's really important for us to also document whether the schools are in urban areas, rural areas, suburban areas, whether they are Title I schools or Title I eligible schools, if they happen to be majority minority schools. So we do a lot of disaggregation work looking at that. So we've provided here for you the breakdown in terms of some of those different demographic features. But please know that we do a lot of testing on the data and spend a lot of time looking at the different disaggregations of the data to see if these trend lines that we are sharing out are significant across all those different audiences or just for some. Now, North Carolina had strong participation last year. North Carolina has been one of our top participating states for many years. We have, as I mentioned, a very nice relationship with your Department of Public Instruction. So here were the number of surveys that were submitted last year from North Carolina. A little bit over 37,000 students, as you can see, about 2,800 teachers, about 1,400 parents, and then smaller amounts of administrators and community members. So let me share with you just a couple samplings from last year's research findings. And again, I chose these to highlight a couple different points for you about the data. We obviously collect a lot of data. There's a lot of different topics that are on the surveys. So the surveys themselves only take about 15, 20 minutes for the stakeholders to complete. So I chose a couple different things for you that I thought might be interesting. This is a really interesting question, and it's one of our traditional questions in the sense that we ask it every year on the Speak Up survey. We ask students about the obstacles or barriers that they face using technology at their school. So this is national data that I'm sharing here with you, and this is from high school students. So high school students told us last fall that the #1 barrier that they face in using technology at their school for learning is that the internet is too slow. After that, they talk about the fact that they are frustrated by some of the filtering that blocks websites that they need. And then you can see the other number 3, 4, and 5 that are on here. These are really interesting because we have seen a lot of change in these obstacles over the last couple years. Let me give you some examples. So in 2011, only about a third of students told us that the internet was too slow. Now you can see it's up to 60% nationwide of high school students say the internet is too slow. Now we all know that schools and districts have made a more significant investment in the last 5, 6 years in terms of their infrastructure. And so it may not really be that the internet is too slow compared to how it was in 2011, but there's more demand for it. They're using it more. So they're more cognizant of that speed, but then there's also might be contention for that access as well. So we thought that was interesting with that shift there in the last 5 years. The other one that was interesting to us is in that in 2011, 50% of high school students said that they couldn't use their own mobile device in school or access their social media tools. Now that has now dropped down to only about a third of high school students say that that's a complaint. That's a reflection of more and more schools are changing their policies around students being able to use their own mobile devices in school, or maybe even social media tools, or maybe it's a statement about students being more savvy in terms of access to those tools during the school day. Now, the one that has not changed in 5 years is also interesting, and that's the one that sits here in this number 3 position. There's just too many rules that prohibit or limit the use of technology in school. So we also think that that's interesting, that there's been movement in a couple different areas, but that this idea of student frustration around some of the rules and regulations that are set up around technology use still continues to be a pain point for students. So speaking of mobile devices, as we just were, let me take a look here at, we seem to have a little bit of an image problem here, that's funny, how students are using mobile devices for learning. So this is a really interesting slide. It's a bit of data that we collect every year, and this is an example again of the type of data that you could be collecting from your stakeholders. So we asked students, what types of digital devices or mobile devices do you have access to personally? So this is not school provided. I'm going to show you that data in a moment. This is individual students that have a smartphone or have a tablet. Mom provided it, dad provided it, grandma gave it as a Christmas present or something like that. So this is really interesting to take a look at from a school or district level, particularly if you wanted to have a better understanding of the types of access that students had to devices outside of school, if you were thinking about a BYOD program, or if you just wanted to be able to assess the students' familiarity with using these tools. So a couple things just really quickly here, and these numbers, percentages from North Carolina were very comparable to our national numbers. So North Carolina students seem to be in the middle of the pack in terms of their access to tools. We do see some differences, obviously, across different types of communities. We can maybe talk a little bit more about that in the question and answer time period if you're interested. But a couple key findings here or takeaways from this is that we are obviously well beyond a tipping point, at least for high school students, in terms of carrying a internet-ready device in their pocket, in their backpack, in their purse, whatever that might be. 89% of your high school students said they have a smartphone. We also see here that tablets tend to be not a product that high school students are using to the extent that elementary students and middle school students tend to have more personal access to a tablet. Laptops is kind of the reverse. The other takeaway here is that students don't have just one of these, so they don't pick, oh, am I going to have a tablet, or am I going to have a smartphone, am I going to have a laptop, or am I going to have a tablet? In many cases, they have multiples, and that has been a really interesting conversation to have with folks about how students are differentiating their use of these different devices based on the tasks or work that they need to do. Now, we also asked students about their access to devices for use within the school day. So what has been provided to them by their school? Here's the national numbers. Now, this is where it's interesting to take a look at the implementation of different types of things, laptop, tablets, and Chromebooks. and to also look at this over time, and also to do, as I mentioned before, some of those comparatives. So let me, for example, give you the comparative between nationwide data and North Carolina data in particular. So at a nationwide level, for example, 32% of high school students told us that they were assigned a Chromebook to use within their school day. Only 24% of high school students in North Carolina told us that was the environment for them. So fairly comparable here in the elementary grades and also middle school, but a little bit less on the high school level. So that's an example of how you could use that comparative data. Now there could be another column here, which is your district. So you could see how you compare to North Carolina, how you compare nationwide. Now we also asked students, so how are you using mobile devices for learning? And this has been very interesting. So when we first started asking about mobile learning, we asked students about what they wanted to do using these mobile devices. But as students have had more and more access, as demonstrated by the last two slides, we switched the question around to see actually how they are using it. And this is a question that, or a data set that many school districts have used both to validate their assumptions about the use of mobile devices, but also to understand in particular how students are using these devices around self-directed activities. So the left-hand side here is the teacher-directed activities. These are things that require teacher sponsorship. So we're going to take an online test. We're going to maybe work on a project, a collaborative project. We're going to use online textbooks. Those things obviously require the interaction of the teacher or the facilitation of the teacher in the process. I actually think that maybe the more interesting set of data is to understand how students are using these mobile devices to increase either the efficiency or the effectiveness of their learning process. So where they are from a self-directed standpoint, using an online dictionary, using these devices to take notes or to receive reminders about tests or projects, and even the opportunity they may have to email or in some cases, depending upon the devices, text their teacher with different types of questions. Now we also asked the respondents, the adult respondents, the teachers, the parents, and the administrators about how they identified the benefits of using mobile devices within learning. So here's another example of the way that we look at the data. In this particular case, we looked at the teachers' responses to that question based on their assignments. So high school teachers, middle school teachers, upper elementary teachers, and then K-1-2 teachers. And this is, again, something that's very interesting to take a look at because we do see some differences. In fact, we see that the elementary teachers are more bullish, shall we say, about the benefits of mobiles in terms of increasing engagement than the teachers in the high school. The teachers in the high school and the middle school and even upper elementary really looked at a key benefit as being increasing the access to online content or preparing the students for college and work experiences. So it's interesting to look at the data, not just what do teachers say, but based on their assignment. Now, the other thing that we do with this data for middle school and high school teachers, we also look at it across what their content area is. So do science teachers, for example, value the use of mobiles or digital content or whatever the technology might be more than math teachers or more than English teachers or history teachers? So again, we look at it through all these different lenses, not just the straight responses. So we also asked administrators over the last couple of years to talk to us about many of the different digital learning initiatives and trends they are implementing in their district for a couple different reasons. One, we wanted to get a handle on what different types of initiatives were being implemented, but then also if they were seeing positive academic impacts already from the implementation of those different initiatives. So I pulled out just the mobile one. I did sort of a mobile theme here for you today. Just the ones that are associated with mobile, but we do ask also about blended learning, flipped learning, competency-based learning, fully online classes for teacher PD, the use of social media to communicate with parents, there's several different areas that we ask administrators to talk to us about what they've implemented and where they've seen positive impact. So this was an interesting set here. Under this category of different types of mobile classroom models, we ask across the idea of, are you allowing students to use their own devices? Are you assigning devices to students in school usage only? Are you allowing students to take those devices home as well? Or is your access to mobile devices fall more under the category of periodic access, where that means maybe it is a cart that comes into the classroom, or individual students are not assigned to devices. They maybe have access through a computer lab or a media lab, something like that. So you can see here that still today, the primary access that students have to technology devices is that periodic access, which again, as I said, could include many different things. The second area is in terms of assigning devices, but in school usage. And then only 25% of North Carolina principals told us that those devices were also allowed to go home. In terms of seeing positive impacts, again, it's that same pattern follows. That periodic access, 51% of the North Carolina principals said, yes, I'm seeing positive impacts associated with that. 40% of the principals that said their model is a school-assigned device. So this is an interesting set of data. Again, it'd be interesting, I didn't do it for you here, but obviously with participation, you get the national data as well, and you can do some comparatives with the national data. Let's bring parents into this conversation. This has been a very interesting set of questions for many districts. And in fact, many districts tell us that their most favorite survey for participation is the parent survey, because it gives them an opportunity to hear from a wide range of different types of parents, not just the parent that's always in the classroom or has the opportunity to be on campus. So this was a particular question. We're asking this question again this year, is that we asked parents, so what concerns you about your child's use of the internet and online tools? Now, this was not specific just to in school or at home. This was in general about the use of the internet and online tools. And so here's data from your North Carolina parents about what their top 8 concerns were. So this is an interesting set of data for a school leader or a district leader to have in terms of understanding particularly about what types of things parents are concerned about, and then really thinking that through in terms of the use of some of these tools, both in the school day or possibly as assignment for homework use, that these are type of things that parents are concerned about. Obviously, that number one, too much screen time, is one that was also the number one nationwide in terms of that. But you can take a look at some of these other ones that are on here. It's been interesting to ask this question over time because we actually have seen that there have been, as you would imagine, some new things that have popped up here on the list. You know, sharing too much information online is one that is gaining in the rankings of parent concerns. Receiving inappropriate or suggestive messages is one that is gaining in the rankings as well. You know, based on that particular question and based on looking at that data about the concerns from parents, as I mentioned before, we decided this year to do a really deep dive on digital citizenship. We really wanted to take a look at the relationship between what students were learning about being good digital citizens and see if there was possibly some causation in terms of students' behavior using different types of technology, if there was a relationship between the access they had at home or at school, if the use of certain types of tools at school maybe were better for developing digital citizenship or actually resulted in potentially some higher dangers for students. So we actually set up a whole new set of questions around digital citizenship on this year's survey. So once again, for many, many districts, and actually when we asked districts last year what their number one question theme area was for this year, digital citizenship was what they told us. We built these new sets of questions. So interesting insights from students, from parents, from educators. Who has responsibility for teaching digital citizenship? What types of skills are you learning or are being taught? What are the priorities at your school? How would you rate your skills? How would you rate your ability to teach digital citizenship skills? So we really think this is going to be a really significant set of data at the national level, but most importantly, giving back to the schools and districts their own locally collected data from their stakeholders about this conversation is something that will be highly actionable. So let me share with you a little bit of teacher data here as well. And again, I'm just trying to give you a couple different samplings of things here that might be interesting for you. Every year we ask teachers what types of digital content they are using in the classroom. Again, we did the disaggregation here based on assignment, though we have looked at it through different lenses as well. And so this is an interesting question because it gives you an opportunity at the district level or at the school leadership level to see if possibly some of the initiatives that you've been promoting or that you've been making available to your teachers are actually resulting in usage. So in many districts, they are seeing, for example, an uptick in the use of videos, in the use of games as something that their teachers are adopting. And so this can give you validation associated with this. This is also an interesting question. We did a special report that we released at the ISTE conference in June, where we took a look at teachers that were in blended learning classrooms, fully online classrooms, virtual classrooms, or had implemented a flipped learning model, and looked at whether or not their use of digital content was different in those classrooms versus more traditional classrooms where, of course, technology was being used, but not in a structured process such as blended, flipped, or fully virtual. It was very interesting because we did see that the teachers that had implemented those new classroom models were maybe a little bit more experimental in their use of digital content. They had higher usage of some of the more emerging types of digital content than the teachers that were still in their traditional classroom. We also, the other thing that we do, and we're so pleased with our partnership with North Carolina and DPI, is that we had the opportunity to do some custom questions for North Carolina. So these were questions that are just on the North Carolina surveys. And so in partnership with DPI, we wanted to find out about teachers, both their familiarity with their school strategic vision, and then also their use of some of the digital materials that had been provided through the state. So this, again, was a very special question that was just on the survey for North Carolina, but was highly impactful in understanding the behaviors associated with the usage of some of those resources. So let's take a pause here and shift gears a little bit. And I want to take you through just a little bit more information about participation in Speak Up, some of the resources that are available to you, and then again, we'll take a look and see about your questions. So this happens to be the home page for the Speak Up Research Project. You get to it by coming to visit us at tomorrow.org and then going directly into Speak Up there. So this is sort of the home page in terms of lots of different types of information. You can see there on the navigation bar, there's some overview activities, there's ways to get involved, there's access to data, there's also news and events that are coming off of this page. So some key steps to getting started today. As I mentioned before, your school and district information is already preloaded because we take that from the NCES database. So the next step is really to identify someone who is going to be the contact person for your district. So come to our website here at speakup.tomorrow.org/register.aspx, and you have the opportunity to pull up your district, take a look at that, and sign yourself up or someone else to be that contact person. The next thing that we always recommend to folks is think strategically about which audiences you want to pull. Now, I'll be honest with you, we have a lot of districts that use all of our surveys. So they want to get input from their students. They want to get input from their teachers, their parents, their administrators. They sign up to do all of the different surveys. Other districts are more deliberate in that, and they take a look at it and they say, well, we're going to just poll our students, or we just want the feedback from parents this year, or parents and teachers. Some make determinations as to which schools are going to participate. So you can take a look at that and make your own decision. This is totally flexible, up to you. Again, this is a tool for you to use. So we are happy to provide these tools to you, but it's most important to us that it be highly impactful for you. So determining what your goals are, what do you want to know, and then which audiences do you want to poll is usually a good next step. Now, there's a wide range of different types of promotional materials that are available from Project Tomorrow. You can use them just the way they are, or please feel free to customize them. So there's a link here where you can take a look at all of those different materials. The other thing that we think is important is that as you get ready to start promoting participation in Speak Up, is to explain to your community, to your stakeholders, why you're participating. So what are your participation goals? So some districts will tell their community, we are doing this because we want to improve or enhance our district technology plan. We want to be able to learn from teachers directly what their professional development needs are, so that teachers, we can make sure that we're addressing those needs for you. We want to hear from parents because we value the stakeholder voice from parents, particularly around their concerns around technology use. So being transparent with your community about the participation goals and why you are doing this, we believe is a great way to get buy-in. You know, you may be like me. I get all kinds of surveys where folks want my feedback. And I am just one of those people. I'm always happy to give feedback. So I'll participate in the survey. I'll give my responses. I'm always very candid and honest with folks, no matter what the topic is. But then I never hear what happened with that data. You know, one of the things that we encourage schools and districts to do is, where appropriate, share data back with your stakeholders. Maybe it's analyzed data. Maybe it's a couple key data points that you think are important. And so explaining your participation goals up front, being transparent about that, and then sharing data on the back end is not only a great way to get buy-in, but also a way to move the conversation further and to really bring your stakeholders into that planning process. So then once you've done that, you promote the survey link to your audiences, and they then come into the survey page. They pick the school or district that they are associated with. They pick whether they are a parent, if they're a teacher, a principal, or a student, as we said, and that takes them directly into the survey. Every bit of data that we have is tied to a school and a district. So that survey taking process is then linked into your schools and districts. So here, coming back to this again, the homepage for Speak Up, I just gave you a little bit of a screenshot here from the Get Involved section. All sorts of information there. That's where your promotional materials are. That's where you have the opportunity to view the surveys in advance if you want to take a look at that. There's tutorials there about participation. Our FAQ is absolutely fabulous, gives you all the information beyond what I can even think about sharing with you today. And then there's also a really interesting participation map there if you want to take a look at that. So the other thing I want to do is I want to introduce you to Jenny Hossert. She isn't here on our webinar today, but she is our Speak Up Operations Manager. Jenny has first-line responsibility for all communications with our schools and districts. So we provided you here with her email address as well as her phone number. She works with schools and district folks all day long, helping them understand Speak Up, getting them set up to participate in Speak Up. If they have any sort of questions, Jenny is your go-to person. So, timeline for access to your data. So the surveys opened up in October. We're going to close the surveys on January 19th, and then you'll get your data in early February. So it's a wonderful way to not only get that response from your stakeholders, but then have that data in early February that can impact your plans for the spring impact your decisions that you're making during the spring for your possibly your summer professional development with your teachers, your planning for the next school year. Again, it is very important for us that the data is highly actionable, and that's why we want to get it back in your hands as soon as possible. Again, you will get every question that is asked on the survey. You will understand from your stakeholders how they answered that question. That includes both the quantitative questions as well as the open-ended questions that are written narrative responses. And that also includes the state level, North Carolina, as well as national data that is there for comparative benchmarks. Now we're going to release our national reports and infographics in the spring, and we'll also do a congressional briefing in May. So a lot of districts like paying attention to those because it's a wonderful way to understand how we're analyzing the data, the things that we're looking at, and lots of folks like to use that within their districts as well. The report that comes back to you looks just like this. So you're able to see, for example, this is a middle school student report, how many responses you had, what the percentage was, and then you can see your percentage is the percentage responses, and then state and national right side by side. Again, at the district level, you'll get this aggregated at the district level, but then you'll also get side by side for each one of your schools as well. So on the back end then, there are many different ways that we can work with you to make meaning of your Speak Up data. So I showed you some special disaggregations here, whether it's by grade or gender or years of experience or teacher assignment. We're happy to work with you if that's something that's interesting for you, for your district, if you're looking for that. We also are always happy to do webinars such as this. I do a lot of this type of webinars for districts, either for cabinet levels or groups of principals. We also can work with you on how to triangulate those three vectors of data. So how to look at activities, attitudes, and aspirations and determine what are the key trends for you. Another thing that we've been doing with some of our high participating districts is that we've actually been creating sort of companion infographics. So we can do the national infographics on our key trends, but then also doing district level ones. Jenny did a really interesting thing last year where she actually created for districts a sample PowerPoint presentation that you could just drop your data into that reflected what we consider to be the key trends or most important things. You can always customize it, but rather than starting with a blank PowerPoint slide, you can actually use our PowerPoint deck presentation and have your localized data there side by side with the national data, for example. And then, of course, we're always interested in supporting your participation to share out the way you're using your Speak Up data for different conference presentations. So I hope I answered a number of questions that you had, but I do want to open it up to some other questions, Amber, if there were some other things that came up.
Yeah, Julie, Catherine actually has a number of questions. So I'm going to go through hers. They'll probably be helpful to others as well. I think you may have sort of addressed this in what you were just talking about, but she asked about the format that the districts receive the results. And also how the results are shared with stakeholders.
Okay, so two different things. We prepare the, your resulting data findings are on an online site. So you come back to that Speak Up site that we talked about before, you sign in as your district contact, you then pick which audience report you want to look at, and then you can see each one of the surveys with the data as I just showed it. That is also exportable. So if you want that in an Excel spreadsheet, you can get that in an Excel spreadsheet. In addition, if you have staff that like to play with data, some districts do, some don't have the time for that. We can also put the data into an SPSS format and give you all of your raw data if you want to participate, if you want to be able to manipulate the data. So online report to exportable into Excel. Third option is SPSS. We are currently working on a new data dashboard that will allow the opportunity to do some customized reporting online. So we'll have more information about that after the beginning of the year. In terms of sharing with stakeholders, that is 100% your determination. We look at this data that has been collected as your data. That is your data to share with your stakeholders as you see fit. From time to time, I'll be honest with you, we'll get a call from a parent, from a school board member, from a community member who says, oh, can I get the Speak Up data for this school or that district? We will always send them back to you. It is your determination, your decision as to what you want to share out with your community. That is not our process. So we will very politely tell folks to get back in touch with their school folks, and then we will give you a heads up into that. That happens once in a while. I encourage schools and districts to share data. You don't have to share all of the data, but share data that is meaningful to what your goals are. I think it's a good way to be transparent with your community, but that's 100% your decision. It's your decision how you want to participate, and it's your decision what data you share with your stakeholders.
Okay, Catherine was also curious about what the commitment from their district would look like for implementation.
So the commitment is to promote the survey link to your stakeholders. So again, you decide which audiences you want to poll, you decide who you want to participate, and then you promote that survey link to your stakeholders. We do everything else. So the back end is already set up. There is nothing else that you need to input to participate. You give us a contact information, we'll communicate information with you. But as far as an investment of time or effort on the part of staff or district, it's really minimal because we're doing all the work for you. Now, on the back end, when you get the data, how deeply you want to get into that data is, again, your call. Some folks will use the data and they will do a planning session internally, and they say, oh, today's the day that we are going to take a look at our Speak Up data and see what trend lines we're seeing in that data, what things we want to make actionable from that data. We have districts that do that with their cabinet, with their school board, with lead teachers, with different school sites, with their principals. That's up to you how deeply you want to get into the data. We have other folks that say, you know, here are the 5 most important questions on the Speak Up survey, and these are the ones that we're going to pay attention to this year. So they'll do a deep dive into examining that data. How far you want to go into using that data on the back end, again, is your call.
Okay, and just 2 more kind of specific questions. You touched on this, but you could clarify. Are they open-ended questions or multiple choice?
The vast majority of the questions are multiple choice questions. However, we do have 1 or 2 open-ended questions on each one of the surveys. So for each of the surveys, there's an ending question, which is a thought-provoking, what do you think about this, kind of a big picture question that's on there. So those responses are narrative responses. You get all of that back as well. We also have in many of the questions, if not all of the questions, an opportunity for an other box. So if we gave you a list of, for example, we asked teachers, how are you using technology to support your professional tasks? In terms of improving your productivity, and we give you about 8 different options. If there's another one that we didn't think of or something that's very unique for you, that's an open-ended response there in the other box. Again, you get both the quantitative data and the qualitative open-ended data back.
Okay, I have 1 more question here, but if anybody else wants to add something, feel free to jump into that chat box. My email address is also ataylor@tomorrow.org if you have any questions that don't get answered here. But Catherine's last question was, does the survey specifically address how learning tools are used to personalize learning, or how digital tools are used? Sorry.
So there are several different questions where we ask about personalized learning as a response. We are very interested in the role of new classroom models as having a role in personalizing learning. So there are several different ways that we are asking the different stakeholders about valuing the experience with new classroom models. We also ask both the teachers and the students, as well as the parents, about the use of digital tools in general to have different types of outcomes on student learning. And one of those is the opportunity to personalize the learning process. And that's asked across several different responses. So there is actually a lot that is in there that can give you some really interesting insights into both how your stakeholders value personalized learning, as well as where they're seeing connections into digital tools for personalized learning. I've actually written a lot about the interaction between digital tools and personalized learning using the Speak Up data. We do an annual digital learning trends report, and there's a heavy emphasis in that annual report. It's the one that we release at ISTE that is focused in on personalized learning. I mentioned a little bit about that today. Again, there's a lot of the reports. You can see a lot of information about the way we analyze the Speak Up data by going to our publications section on our website on that Speak Up area. And you can see the white papers, you can see the reports, you can see the infographics, you can see the different presentations that we do about the data. And there's a lot of interaction in there about how digital tools and technology are supporting personalized learning.
All right, that's it. No other questions have come in.
Well, folks, it's been absolutely great being here with you today. I hope that we answered a lot of your questions. As Amber said, you can either contact me, my contact information is up right here, or Amber, and she again is A. Taylor, Taylor at tomorrow.org, and we're happy to answer additional questions for you. But really look forward to working with you. Please feel free if you have any sort of questions or concerns, or if there's other questions that come up from other folks within your office, let us know. We're happy to work with you and look forward again to great participation from North Carolina. Thanks so much for being with us.